My name's Stephen Bauman. I've been a teacher at the Florence Academy of Art for the last, I don't know, almost 15 years. And I originally from Miami, Florida. Not that you'd really be able to tell from my accent or my voice, but I'm a figurative painter, and I live in New Jersey.
What was it like growing up in Miami?
Growing up in Miami, I was actually way more into like skateboarding and graffiti and punk rock than I was into any kind of representational artwork. And it really wasn't until I left high school, went to 2 years of art college, and then left art college that I figured out, where I could go to kind of learn about representational drawing and painting. So Miami was in a way like a very interesting like petri dish to grow up in, but it's honestly not like a place that I look back on that fondly of.
Where did you first receive formal training in fine art?
I was studying in a dropout prevention program in downtown Miami, which was the brainchild of actually a really, really intelligent guy named Mike Guthrie. So Mike Guthrie was the principal of the Knight Center School for Applied Technology, which was in the 3rd and 4th floors of the Hyatt Regency Hotel in downtown Miami. Because I was kicked out of my school in Homestead in 9th grade, the story of which I'll not tell, but because I was kicked out of there, I started to attend this dropout prevention program. And in that school, I met an art teacher named Ryan Fike, who was just one of these counterculture guys. So he had been involved in like underground music and artwork in the 70s and 80s. Like he was doing like basically like counterculture music and art. So I'm in his art class, and basically I'm probably kind of like a young version of him. I'm just into like I said, like subcultures, graffiti and skateboarding and music, and that's mostly what he was into as well. And so I think we just had an affinity for each other, and he was the first person who really introduced me to the idea that you could actually study artwork, like that could be a kind of a lifetime endeavor, which I was never really aware of previously.
Who were the artists you were looking at in those days?
But that was the time at which I was really getting into like the drawings of Egon Schiele, and I'm not sure really if there were any contemporary painters I was looking at, but I was looking at actually in particular secessionist artists like from Vienna in the 19th century, because they just had this very graphic sensibility that resonated with me a lot in that moment.
How did those influences change you?
I get to thinking a lot about what the trajectory of influence is, right? Because we all like start out painting and drawing, and then we're looking very intensely at somebody. For young people, it's usually someone very angsty like Odd Nerdrum or Egon Schiele, and then they begin to like kind of reproduce Odd Nerdrum or Egon Schiele, which like about, I think, even when you're doing it, but you're not really, I don't know that you're necessarily able to like overcome the strength of that influence in that moment. And I don't actually think that it's that you get a whole lot stronger as you get older. It's just a matter of like a mixture, right? If you have only one substance in a mixture, it will predominate naturally, right? And then as you add more and more and more, like think about like mixing a color, right? You mix red and white, you have a tint, right? If I mix black, I get purple. If I put in yellow, I get closer to gray, and depending upon like the proportion, you come up with this this median color in between all of them. And I feel like whatever my expression is now really is just a version of this accumulation, and maybe things that I've just kind of leaned into. So I remember that moment of like drawing and painting like Schiele, just because I didn't know possibly how I could do any other thing. And I went through my sergeant phase, and I went through my whoever else phase, probably an Odd Nerdrum phase in there as well, because I was very angsty when I was young. But time goes by and you just become like, it's not like you become who you, I found my voice. I didn't find my voice. Everybody, you just have your voice.
What brought you to Florence?
In 2004, I moved from Miami to Florence, Italy to study. And I was immediately confronted with effectively like all of the best artists from the places where they were that decided that they did not have enough to learn there. And then they went to Florence. So you have this incubator of incredibly driven, very talented artists like together working and studying in this paradigm. And they had all been like listening to Wagner and Beethoven and reading Homer and Joshua Reynolds and this, and I was not at all. And so I even probably felt an even smaller sense, like walking into that place. Being also from like a background of doing graffiti, it's not that there weren't graffiti writers that went there, but certainly you were in the minority doing so. And I thought for the longest time that I really had to kind of fit in, but just like you figure out with anything in life, it's the features of you that are an outlier that are actually what make you interesting. And so while integrating and into that culture and like trying on that hat for a while was really useful to kind of get to know where I'm at a little bit better. Eventually, like most artists, I think, I went on to kind of draw on the well of inspiration I had in my youth, more so than something that was manufactured in my adulthood.
Where did you think your studies at the Florence Academy would take you in your work?
I'm not sure that I had a great sense of perspective about my abilities as an artist for a very long time. It's not a career path for which there are like established rungs on the ladder that you have to hit. There is a vague shape of this that you should start showing in galleries and you should progress from group shows to solo shows and everything else. But it seems that every artist that I come to know professionally and talk to has a different version of that story, none of which seem to necessarily have a red thread that kind of ties them together. So when I started out, I was, as you might imagine, like coming from a world where I was just like a juvenile delinquent, effectively, without a lot of kind of guidance from adults. When I was, 18, I moved out. I went to college, and I was just working and studying and doing my thing the best I could. That's not like a great trajectory or like a great path to like having a strong sense of like self-belief and security about who you are and what you're doing. So I think well into my 20s and early 30s, feeling insecurity about my work was a huge problem. You eventually try to take the safe route for things. Not to disparage the safe route, but you need a mixture of things, I think, to improve. And so I was always looking to maybe try to fit in to the school I was at, the culture there.